this committee. You're welcome, Bishop.
Thank you. Good morning, all. My name is John Makali, Member of Parliament.
I'm used to other practices elsewhere. I presume before Raz is architect, Bishop, Dr. David.
Morning, Alex Amwata, Answered Officer.
Morning, Peter Motavia, Audio Officer.
Bishop, do you have anybody else to introduce? You'll be, and Bishop has brought me up quite well, spiritually. Apart from that, no other relation, and I confirm that that upbringing is in no way going to affect my...
Before the oath is
the information I shall give before this Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on the matter under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you, Bishop. You may resume your seat. The next action we have to take is to verify your documents. Request you also to be quite brief in your answers to questions that are asked. Just answer the questions as posed. You do not have to be very generous with the information that nobody is going to render services if this House is good enough to approve you. Thank you very much, Bishop. Welcome. You may start.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity, and thank you for all the members, honorable members who are here for this hearing. My name, as you have been told, is David Oginde. I was born some 63 years ago, actually going to 64 this November, in November 1959, on the 10th. That's what my mother told me. And from there, I grew up and went into Ndenga Primary School, which you have just mentioned, which was in the neighborhood. And after that, came to Kabete Technical School, where I did my then O-levels for 4 exams. Then proceeded to Mombasa Polytechnic for high school, where I did my A-levels, and then went to the University of Nairobi. I studied architecture from 1980 to 1986. From there, I was called, because while I was in the university, I was the chair of the Christian Union, Christian students within the university. I served as chairman. And during that time, there were people from outside who would come and help us in matters leadership on how we can be better leaders as students. And so, having benefited from the same, when I finished, I was asked whether I could also do likewise for fellow students who are now taking over leadership from us. And I thought, since I had benefited from that, why not? So I was asked if I could give 2-3 years to this, which I agreed to do. And interestingly, the 3 years turned to 11 years. So I stayed with the Fellowship of Christian Unions, known briefly as Focus, for 11 years, rising to the place of National Director. So when my time with Focus came to an end, I thought it was now time to go back to architecture, that which I had studied. But then my church approached me and asked whether I could join the church staff to provide leadership in the area of administration, which again was going to be for a brief time. And I thought, I've benefited from our church, why not? So I came in to then Nairobi Pentecostal Church as the pastor for administration, which I served for about 4 years. Then I was asked, because our senior pastor then was leading one of our branches, was leaving, he was a Canadian, and they needed a replacement. I'd never thought of myself as a pastor, but I was approached whether I could take over from him. And so I did, and became the senior pastor for what is now called CITAM Karen. From there I came to senior pastor of Valley Road, which is our main church. Then I was appointed deputy bishop and eventually ended up as bishop of Crisis Answer Ministries, where I served from 2010 to 2020. So from that point, having completed my 10-year term, which is the term for bishops in our system, I had developed an interest in leadership matters, having looked at the kind of leadership that was happening in our continent, in our nation. In fact, when I was leaving Focus, I thought this is what I want to do. But then I was invited to church. But in the meantime, with the help of our church, I went and studied. I did a master's in leadership at the Pan-Africa Christian University, which was the first university to introduce leadership studies in Kenya. And then after that, I did my PhD in Regent University, USA. So by the time I was now leaving my bishop role, I thought I could set up a system in which we could help other leaders in the leadership area. So we formed a firm together with other associates called the Catalyst. So that is where I am now, where we do leadership training for various individuals. We do consultancy for organizations. We do coaching for individuals. And I would say it has been a great experience. Our focus has been value-driven leadership, which we provide to individuals and organizations. So when this position of chair of EACC came up, several people who have known me and known the kind of things that I've done within the leadership circles thought, why don't you consider this? I first thought, I don't know whether I want to do it. But later, in further consideration and praying and consulting, I thought, why not? If not me, who else? So that's how I applied, and the process has got me to where I am now. So my prayer and hope is that should this House consider me to be suitable to do that work, I would make a contribution to making our nation a value-driven country. That's my prayer and hope.
Thank you, Bishop. A little bit about your family.
Yes.
Right from your parents to where you are today. It's very important for Kenyans.
Yes. I was born, as I said, in Siaya, in a place called Aboke in Okwala. And I was born to Daniel Oginde, who is now late, and my mother, Joyce, who is actually with us here in Nairobi. And we have 6 children from my mother, the firstborn of my mother, but not the firstborn of my father. My father had other wives, but he brought us up as one family. So my siblings, especially my elder brother, was very instrumental in the journey that I've taken in life. They, together with my other brothers, ensured that I got the education that I got and got to the place where I am today. So I can say that in spite of coming from a polygamous family, I actually learned that polygamous families are difficult when I went to high school, because for us, we grew up in a very harmonious, happy family. But that is my family background. I'm married to Nancy, who is an advocate of the High Court, now retired together with me. She used to serve in the bank as in the legal department, and now we are serving together in training and consultancy. We have 2 children, Joyce and Chris. Joyce is working, Chris is still working on his studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Bishop, now I'm going to, so that after a short while, we'll also ask you again, how much do you have? And have you been able to accumulate through other means money that you didn't have when you got in here? So can you kindly state to the panel, the committee, what your net worth is and what it comprises of?
Is that cash or everything?
Everything. Cash. Usually it is cash, property, or put together into some form of a cash statement.
Well, I have not asked any accountant to help us with the valuation of the properties and things that we have. But my own estimation when I was, because it was in the questionnaire that I received, was 170 million.
170 million.
Yeah.
We note and take that down. It's composed of what?
It comprises houses, a few houses that we have that we are letting out, our own house where we live, some pieces of land that we have here and there, and then some investment in other cash investments, insurance, and so on.
And some rural shamba in Aboke.
In Aboke, I only have my father's shamba, which has not been given to me.
Thank you, Bishop. Just before we continue, we have one other member who has joined them. Then you are able to answer. So just I hope you have a booklet somewhere and a pen.
Yes.
Where you can note down
Yes.
our questions. Bishop, you're taking over from another retired bishop, Eliud Wabukala. And we know for sure that the shoes he wore were big. And he was able to keep the EACC intact for the time he served. We know for sure from past experience, EACC has always been riddled with difficulties, problems, fights, and not many of the people have headed that institute.
Okay.
And you are ready for the second one.
Okay.
So that
I thought I was going to answer right away.
The chair
Okay.
directed
Okay.
that.
Let's take
The chair directed that we do 3, and then he answers.
No, let's do 3, 4. Up to here, then we take the next one.
And the nominees okay with that. Thank you very much. Bishop, you are getting into a very important position, a very coveted position. Because, like you said before, part of our development is being hindered by our ethical or unethical behavior, the way you see it. Pilferage of resources, all those things. But practically, you have heard about some terms that are being used in this country. One of them is state capture. Another one is weaponizing the war on corruption.
Mm.
And basically, they mean that anti-corruption institutions or investigative agencies within the government sometimes are used for purposes of targeting persons who are seen not to be politically attuned with the government in power. We would want to hear your comment about this and what you will do as a chairperson of EACC to safeguard EACC from political patronage. Tied to that, Chairman, if you allow, the pundits have said that part of that state capture in terms of the anti-corruption institutions is an amorphous institution called the multi-agency approach, where the different organizations that are fighting corruption, DCI, EACC, Asset Recovery, KRA, name them, are brought together under the chairmanship of the Attorney General. And through that, the executive has found a way of infiltrating and also managing the decisions that are made thereof. Now, the Constitution demands, and the Chair said, some level of independence, EACC, and also especially the DPP in terms of the decisions to charge. We would also want to hear your position regarding bringing together independent institutions in one room to decide on how they are going to fight corruption. Yet the Constitution gives them independent roles. We know they are interdependent, but functionally, they are supposed to be independent. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Farah. Then we go.
Let's not rush through this.
Yeah.
You can have a member ask a questions, 1, 2, 3, as many. Get the eminent Daktari to answer, and progressively it gives a lot of mileage and credit to the process itself. So I want to take a bit of my time here on this. And Daktari, you wrote a number of articles in the past.
Yes.
On the interreligious issues. In one of those articles, I remember very well, you said that every time there's a terror attack and people are killed, invariably in most cases they're Christians. And the government and the Christian and the Muslim community comes on and says, this is the work of criminals. This is the work of misguided people. And you said this argument is hollow. Going into the future, the Muslims have to do something for this thing to stop. And if that doesn't happen, you predicted a religious war in this country. Do you still hold those kind of ideological persuasion or intellectual conviction? Because we are living in a country which is multi-denominational and multi-religious faiths. This is my first question, but I'll ask a second question. But that's why I was saying that it's better that we keep on exhausting this one at a time. Mr. Chair, look at the kind of, these kind of things when it happens in other jurisdictions, whether it's in the Commonwealth, whether it is in the American system, we have normally a good time. So that by the time we are through with Professor Daktari, he is going to be happy, and the rest of us are going to be happy, and the country is going to be happy.
Thank you, Honorable Farah. I hear you, but we also have our own practices, which we've been actually executing as members of parliament. It is to take those questions in batches, and then they are answered serially the way we have posted them. So if you have 2 questions, please, I think just ask them.
I will have.
If you have 2 or 3, ask them
questions,
straight.
I could even have. He's going to answer.
Then
there's going to be, Chair, please. He's going to answer, and there are going to be questions as a result of the answer. And it's good for the men we are now interviewing. I think what we need to do, let us not try and rush through these things, because then we look like we take away our own dignity from this thing.
No.
I think we are likely to reach the kind of arrangements that we all want to reach, but allow us to also go through this thing. It's good for him. It's good for the rest of us too.
We've had you, Honorable Farah. If you have a second question, then we will give you a chance to ask after the first one is answered. So let's hear from Honorable Kagusha.
Is not in question. And I want to look at that from a different perspective, maybe from the chair. You are taking over also from a very good bishop, Bishop Wabukala, as the head of EACC. As a bishop, and even though Bishop Wabukala was able to bring together the EACC as an institution, I don't know whether as a country we have seen any reduction in corruption or corrupt practices, or whether we are now built better as a country in terms of the corruption rating. And in my opinion, we are not doing any better than before we had Bishop Wabukala in place. Now, this is not to indict his track record, because I believe he has tried as much. I've been with him in some of the functions where the EACC was actually taking back some of the property which had been corruptly obtained, and the EACC was repossessing. So I'm not putting any blot on his track record. But now you coming in as a bishop, does it add any more merit or any more weight on our fight against corruption? Does it help to improve on the ethos of this country? You have pointed out that you want to bring about a nation which is value-based. Are we going to have benefit from you are standing as a bishop to have a better value system as a country? And one would also ask, are these value systems going to be subjective, or are they going to be value systems that can be accommodated by all the Kenyans from all walks of life? And how does that also imply or have implications on the issue of preventive approach, other than where we are looking at corruption at the end of the chain? How can we handle this and ensure that it helps us to deal with the prevention, other than deal with the corrupt practices that have already been entrenched in the country? Thank you.
Thank you. May we have...
And very straightforward. Corruption is a moral issue. Corruption is not a problem of want. In fact, the most corrupt people are the ones who have it in abundance. And you come from a background whereby you've been winning souls for Christ. And that has been your matrix for your success. Now that this committee and this country is looking up to you to ensure that corruption is not just reduced, but eradicated. And bearing in mind that from your background, you took over from our good friend, Bishop Dennis White, and you carried on very well. Jesus is the Answer Ministries. I can see all the churches are in every estate now, which is very commendable. But I want you maybe to tell this committee, bearing in mind that corruption is a source of our poverty in this country, what is the silver bullet are you going to apply in the anti-corruption authority? Other than, and I've said this without an element of contradiction, when religious people are leading EACC, EACC looks very good on the face of it. But in terms of value, you've had conversations that we are losing 2 million in this country every day. 2 billion shillings every day. So, as Kofu, succinctly tell us, this committee, what silver bullet are you going to apply to eradicate poverty, to eradicate corruption in this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. How will we keep a commission intact? One of the key principles of good governance is to separate management from the governance body. I see the commission as a governance organ of the EACC, and then we have a secretariat that is leading the management side, headed by a CEO. So the role of the chair and the commission, which under normal circumstances we call a board, is to provide a right working environment through which the management team can do their work. We are supposed to provide direction in which way we should be going. We're supposed to provide policies and principles that can help implement our mission and mandate. We are supposed to provide oversight, bringing in accountability of the team that is there so that everything is being done according to what we desire. And then to build a cohesive spirit between these two teams, both what let me call it the board for now for ordinary language, but in our case it's called the commission. So the commission, first of all, has to be cohesive. We understand one another, bound by our common understanding of what our mandate is. So as chair of that commission, the first thing I would like us to do is ensure that we as a commission understand what our mandate is and how to execute it in the best way possible. Then the Secretariat is looking to us to provide them with the right support, putting in place a right environment for them to be able to execute whatever they have been called upon to do. And then together we work towards a common goal and purpose. So really, I see the role of the chair and the commission as being that of making very clear what our vision is, what our common mandate is, and rallying people around that so that we work together as a cohesive team. Because if we don't do that, then like you have said, and Vice Chair also had expressed fears, we will fall apart. So that, in my view, is the most important. This commission has been painted as an army. So you hear fighting corruption. I don't know what it is, but if I use that language, there is no army that can go to war when they are not together and hope to win that battle. So the battle has to be won first at the unity level. And I believe that that is something that we can work on. I come into, if I get the position, I come into a commission team that has already been there. So it's really understanding where everybody is at and how we can work together. So I believe with that, we should be able to keep the commission intact, focused, and able to deliver on its mandate. I was asked about weaponizing the fight against corruption. I think this is the worst thing that has happened to our country. We have put so much drama around the fight against corruption. And it is around this drama that the dragon escapes. I believe that if we are going to be successful, this whole process of fighting corruption, or as I would prefer to put it, promoting integrity, has to be a collective effort that involves all of us as Kenyans. The focus has been so much on public servants, but public servants don't corrupt themselves. We Kenyans corrupt them. The private sector are involved. So we have to really work together towards a common understanding that corruption is bad for the country. Once we are agreed on that, then it will be easier for us to find ways and means of how to tackle this monster. But as long as it's left to the Anti-Corruption Commission, I can say we'll run around in circles. And those people who know how to play their games will play their games. And as I said, it is in that drama that the dragon will disappear. So I'm looking at a place where we first of all come into this, not as Kenyans, not that responsibility lies with the commission, but that responsibility lies with me. So in whichever part of government you are, whether you are in the judiciary, or you are in the legislature, you are in the executive, you are in the independent commissions, whether you are in the corporate private world, or you are in an ordinary Kenyan back in the village, first of all, we have to say, we are tired of corruption. And therefore, we want to fight this thing together. If we get into that, because this is a culture change that will make a difference. There has to be a culture transformation. Nations that have successfully instilled integrity within their systems, it has never been one person doing it. It has been a collective culture change that all of us are committed to and are pursuing. That will remove the drama because we are all playing in the same league, we are all in the same field. There are no people playing out there and others are playing in here. So it will therefore help us to reduce this thing we are calling weaponizing. Because weaponizing of the fight against corruption is a reality. We have seen in this country, not too long ago, cases that are being withdrawn against people who are supposed to have been engaged in corruption. I see only two possibilities. Either that in the first place, those who are false allegations, or in this second place, it is a false allegation. So whether the people who brought them first in were weaponizing corruption or fight against corruption, or the people who are releasing them have also done the same. The truth does not lie in between. It is in either side. And that's how, therefore, people begin to believe that I can be corrupt and get away with it. Because when we see these kinds of things happening, we need to, as a commission, when we take over a case, that case be thoroughly investigated with facts and figures, so that by the time a case is being prosecuted, it is hopefully a watertight case, where there are real facts, there are real figures that can get this case through. Then you do not have to keep withdrawing cases or bringing them in just because you want to victimize one person or help a person to escape. That, I believe, will really, really help us. And it is related to the next question about this multi-agency team. I think as Parliament, we need you to help this country by putting in place proper legislation that can facilitate the body or agency that fights corruption to be a one-stop shop. That is the only way we will succeed. But as long as there are too many players in the field and kicking in different directions, we are not likely to succeed. I borrow from a place like Singapore. They have a one-stop shop anti-corruption commission, if we use the same term. They don't call it the same. But they have investigative, they have prosecutorial powers. And so whatever they are able to do, when they take it to court, it is one-stop shop. So it's not handing over to different people. I believe that if we put that kind of system in place so that cases are investigated, information is got, and it is prosecuted by the same people, we may find that some of these loopholes that we have found our people taking advantage of may be sealed. So I'm looking to a place where Parliament can put in legislation that empowers the anti-corruption agency to do all that is within their powers to do, and that they are also equipped and financed to be able to do that. I come to our brother, Honorable Farah Maalim. His question is not so directly on corruption, but he is concerned about my comments. Weaponized.
Muslim. If you have those extreme positions against Muslims, maybe of them and get Christians in that place as the first business.
Unless you
I
are
don't think-
weaponized.
So you
I don't think you're trying to protect the bishop. You're
Okay.
leaving it
Yes.
frankly.
Proceed, Bishop.
Just proceed, Bishop.
Thank you. If you would go back to the article that I wrote, you will find that actually what it said is contrary to what you have presented. What I was saying is that children are playing in the compound, in the neighborhood. And every time a child cries that somebody has hit them, it is my child. Every time another child cries, it is my child. No matter how much I say that these are just unruly children, I have closest relationship with top Muslim leaders. Sheikh Olenado is one of my closest friends. We talk almost every other day. And so if they had those kinds of problems with me and others who have been there before, I can name them, Professor Busaidi, wherever he is, he can attest to that. We have worked very closely. So if I had those kinds of feelings against Muslims in general and the faith in particular, I wouldn't have got to the leadership place that I am at today. But we have to raise concerns so that we build a cohesive Kenya. I work very well in various sectors. You can ask any of them how I related with them and whether I hold. And you are pushing this matter to the place where it would actually get us to the fears that I had. Because when we begin to accentuate something that was very simple, that was in a public newspaper, and I don't remember you writing to me because we put our contacts there.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, would you kindly guide the nominee to address you rather than to direct the communication
to
your members?
I hear you. It's through the chair.
Yes, through the chair. I thank you. I wish we had a silver bullet that we could use and shoot this thing one day and it is gone. When you look at nations that have successfully fought corruption, there are certain things that have been done and that have helped them to get where they have got. Somebody mentioned Rwanda, which is just our neighbor. There was a time we used to think that Africans, perhaps it's an African problem. There's something wrong with the color of our skin. Somebody, maybe perhaps the same color goes into our hearts, but it is not true. We are ordinary human beings, and as a religious person, I can tell you for a fact that the human being is naturally corrupt. So you have to work towards helping them towards uncorruption or integrity and value. That can only be done by taking certain measures. One is what we have sung in this country as zero tolerance to corruption. If we are going to be successful in our fight against corruption and instilling a value-based society, we have, as Kenyans, to be intolerant to corruption. I think this is one country, and I'm part of it, where we are very tolerant to corruption. I say that because there are certain nations where if a person is named or a hint that they may have been involved in any kind of corrupt deals, they cannot hold any public office. In fact, if they were already holding, they step down of their own accord. In this country, cases can be in court, even some that have been already ruled upon. And we still allow those people to hold public office. We have seen, as Kenyans, and I'm talking to us as Kenyans, not just leaders, we are the ones who vote in people who, just after elections, we are crying that these people are corrupt. Who put them in there? We are the ones who did, through our vote, which means we don't mind these kinds of people being in our midst. We have to loathe corruption if we are going to fight corruption. We are the people who give 50 shillings, 200 shillings to police officers. And then we say police officers are very corrupt. Who gave them the 200 shillings? Who gave them the 50 shillings? Who gave them the 2,000? The police did not get into your pocket and rob you of that money. We are a corrupt nation. So for me, if there's a silver bullet, it is for us to first of all work in transforming the thinking of Kenyans towards corruption. Many of us have not associated, and our honorable member did try to do that in his asking the question. We have not associated some of the problems that we are facing as a society with the fact of corruption. We have not associated some of the poverty levels that we are experiencing with the fact that there are certain individuals who take the monies that don't belong to them. In this country, we can shut down all our sugar factories at one go. And then there's a sugar shortage. And then we import sugar, sell it to our people at exorbitant prices because we are servicing our factories. How can all factories be serviced at the same time? That's why our sugar then gets expensive. The same you can go with maize. We have a bumper harvest until farmers have nowhere to take their crop. It rots in their farms. They sell it at throwaway prices. And then soon thereafter, there is no maize in the country. Then we import maize. Who is corrupt? We are a nation that needs help and needs it urgently. But it will start with us changing our perspective to wealth and riches. The honorable member said this is a moral issue, and I agree with him 100%. Morality is a very personal thing. We can even be born in the same family, brought up with the same parents, but one turns out as a very wicked person, and the other one turns out as a very good person. Why? Because of the path that they have chosen to follow. I would like to see a situation where we as Kenyans choose the right path in order for us to go forward. If I get this opportunity, one of the second thing that successful nations have done is political will. That corruption can be fought only from the top down. I would like to see a situation where we have our top leaders being champions for integrity. Our CSs, our PSs, our governors, our heads of different agencies of government, our heads of corporates in different places, to come out voluntarily and say, I'm going to be a champion of integrity and values, because it cannot be forced. Enforcement, I can tell you as a preacher, God who created us tried it. If I use that in a human language, it did not succeed. Putting laws, those of you who are Christian know how thick the Old Testament is. It's huge, full of laws, the things that you should not and should not do and do and do and don't. Until the revolution that came where people are allowed to make the right choice. That's what revolutionized human morality. And therefore, these champions that we are thinking about should be champions who voluntarily, I would like to see some cabinet secretaries who will say, I want to be a champion of integrity in my ministry, voluntarily. And this is what I commit myself to do. And we as the Anti-Corruption Commission, be there to support that CS, to see that in that ministry, things are done with integrity. We would like to see governors who come out and say, I'm going to be a champion in my county for integrity, and it has been done. So that my county will be the little Rwanda. Rwanda is the size of some of our counties. Can those people champion integrity within their counties? I believe that if we were to raise just a few champions who voluntarily, and I emphasize the word voluntarily, not enforced, voluntarily, come out and say, I am going to be a champion of integrity in my area of leadership. If the IG was to come out and say, I'm going to be a champion of integrity in the police sector, what do you think would happen in that sector? But as long as we are policing people, in quotes, human ingenuity is amazing when it comes to corruption. Anglo-leasing has never been unraveled because it was created by brilliant minds that even external investigators have failed to do. So I believe that we can do certain things that can help this nation to become the nation that we want. And we have the great potential of being a prosperous first world country. Thank you.
Chairman, kindly, do
Yes.
you want the Kenyan to judge you? What are these things you want to tick and say, I did this, I did?
Thank you. Perhaps you didn't. Yes.
So basically, it means that you will get it.
Chair, we may not be
just-
reached.
just
Please wait, there is another round
You'll
of
be reached.
question.
You'll be rich. It was those are supplementaries,
Questions,
but,
yes.
but that's the last one, so that I come to you.
I think,
Do-
Chair,
do-
you
do
can
not
give
be
members
afraid.
an assurance that we will have a second.
As a man of the church, specific areas where you think sufficient things have not been done. You mentioned Anglo-leasing. I'm beginning to like you on this one. You mentioned Anglo-leasing, I said it's brilliant minds, but you have got a more brilliant mind to unravel it. Are you willing to go to areas like Anglo-leasing, implementation of the Ndungu report, insist on the TJRC because that's where the biggest corruption is, report being made public, so that are you going to use your independence, independent from the government and the appointing authority, to go into the areas where there were serious things and they've been pushed under the carpet for a very long time?
We need to focus on high-level corruption in order for us to really tackle this. And again, I would appeal to Parliament, I'm not sure whether there's such legislation, but there should be, that high-impact corruption cases, there should be a legal framework that they should be dealt with expeditiously, the way we deal with presidential petitions, so that they are not dragged on forever. Either people are guilty or they are not. So if there is a high-impact case, we could say within legislation, they have to be completed within 6 months or within 3 months, whatever it takes, so that when a judge sits on this case, they go with it until it is concluded. So that we don't have this situation where a case runs on for 10 years, runs on for several years. If Parliament can help the Commission, whether I'm chair or not, but as a Kenyan, I would appeal that we put time frames for corruption cases, especially the big ones. The other thing is, I already said it a little earlier, is how the fight is focused, so that the people who are engaged in this are actually working together. Whether it is the judiciary, it is Parliament, it is the EACC, it is the executive, it is the DPP office, and all those agencies, the LSK, for example, I would appeal to them that they talk to their members so that we do not have technical arguments. You know, you can see that this person has the bottle, but I say, no, but the bottle you said was green, this one is blue. And just on the basis of that, a case is thrown out. If we are serious about fighting this, let's focus on the real things, not on technicalities. So if we can get LSK and their team to talk to their members that when a thing is a thing, let it be a thing. Let's not go around and say, oh, it was this and all that. And this is what is causing the dragon to flee, because while we are fighting on the color of the bottle, you said it is all blue, but it's not, it is light blue. The dragon has flown. So if we are able to make some very strict provisions for how corruption cases are handled, then the Anglo leasing, the KEMSA, the other many corruption cases that have lingered with us, even Goldenberg is still with us, some 30 years later. I think we should be able to fight this.
That makes you the most fit person to take over this particular commission? I didn't see it, and I'm sort of still asking myself, are we having the right person or not? Secondly, one of the critical things this commission is charged with is vetting people for public office, clearing people to get into public office. And the document that is used at the moment is just a form which is filled and submitted to EACC. And then it's, you fill it and submit it. You went through this particular process yourself. And I've looked at the form which you filled, and what disturbs me is supposed to be a clearance form. But you see the clearance form says, this acknowledgement is not a clearance by EACC. The form which you sent to EACC and what was remitted back is a clause that this form is not a clearance by EACC. Do you think the current clearance systems that are there for clearance for public officers are sufficient? And if they are not sufficient, what do we need to do to make this system much more foolproof? Because we have seen people who have issues, who have corruption cases, are landing into public offices. And out of clearance by the same EACC, which you want to head, are you satisfied with the systems for clearance? And if you are not satisfied, what interventions you will be able to take? 3, the focus on corruption, and you rightly pointed out, has been corruption in the public sector. There is a lot of corruption that goes on in the private sector. A lot of corruption that goes on in the private sector, which you rightly agreed. What initiatives, what practical measures are you going to take to ensure that we combat corruption in the private sector, which goes unnoticed? Finally, on issues of legislation, and I heard you mentioning LSK, the Law Society of Kenya, of which I'm a member, in the issues of legislation. And we also have had discussions with the Secretariat, which you are going to work with. And the issue, their mindset is, the issue is not about legislation, it's about implementation. Have you familiarized yourselves with the laws governing corruption, the fight against corruption? And if you have done so, do you think there is a lacuna in those laws? And if there is that lacuna, what is it which you can be able to tell this committee? Because the members of parliament will need to push up that.
Right.
And then, in your view, is the LSK a stumbling block to the fight against corruption? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Honorable John Makali Kandui. Honorable Steve Mogaka, West Mugirango.
I'm also equally worried listening to you. I've not still changed my practice. Whenever Bishop is speaking, we listen, and that is why we have been pensively listening. But a few very disturbing statements have come in the course of your responses. One of them, which was raised by Honorable Farah, about this communal condemnation of illegal acts of any nature. And even in answering, you appeared to profile the police, you have appeared to profile the LSK, and you even said verbatim on Hansard that we are a corrupt nation or country. Words which are extremely disturbing, because if the lawyer in me were to ask how many of those corruption incidences a bishop has reported to any agency, I will not be surprised that there is none. So, in answer to the questions I'm going to make, Bishop, I implore you to do us lesser preaching and give us specifics, to do things that are going to help Kenya exorcise the demon of corruption from this country. Because children are not going to school, starvation is in this country, roads are what they are because of corruption. And answers cannot be, Bishop, that we do a cultural change. That is the business of religious people, which you are, and precisely confirming to the third parliament that you have failed in your role in changing the culture of Kenyans. If preaching and cultural change were the answer to killing corruption, that was your preserve, that was your calling, and we still have corruption, even when your immediate predecessor was also a religious leader. We still have corruption. So preaching to us about promotion of integrity is a religious ethos, and Kenyans are looking for pragmatic solutions to dealing with corruption. One of the items or toolkits, Bishop, you will be using if you qualify to be chair is an act made by this parliament in 2012. It is called the Leadership and Integrity Act. What religious leaders preach, us in parliament have reduced it to a law saying how state officers are supposed to conduct themselves. And that is the toolkit for use by the anti-corruption agency. Since I'm a lawyer and you are not, I will help you what Section 9 of that act provides. The heading of that is responsibility and duties. And it states, subject to the Constitution and any other law, a state officer shall take personal responsibility for the reasonably foreseeable consequences of any actions or omissions arising from the discharge of the duties of his office. It is reduced to that state officers must take personal responsibility. I would want, as you respond to my question, whether you know any state officer in this country that has been held squarely responsible for acts or omissions relating to their office. And to help you, Section 7 states what the state officers are required to do. And that Section 7, which is titled Rule of Law, because unless there is rule of law in this country, it is anarchy. And Section 7 of that act says, a state officer shall respect and abide by the Constitution and the law. This country has a constitution, and this parliament has enacted the laws. So what toolkit do you have, Bishop, to take to Integrity House that will ensure that every state officer who violates the law faces the law and not a summon from EACC? Secondly, Bishop, you come from a religious background, and charges have been accused, whether by politicians or others, of conduits for money laundering. When it comes to churches receiving money for promoting criminal activities in this country, are you going to rise beyond your faith and stand for country? Very finally, Bishop, in your answer you did mention about people who have been charged still, I don't know whether you said remaining in office or something like that. Our Constitution provides for the fundamental right of innocence until proven guilty. Yet, statute law provides that upon a charge being read to a public officer, they stand interdicted, suspended, or removed from office, whatever the action. What is your position as you seek to take over Integrity Center? Because a charge remains an allegation until proof is made. What do you carry to Integrity Center? Is it that a charge sheet is read against a governor or a member of parliament and you want them out of office? My last question is, you alluded to lawyers either being sympathetic with the suspects or things of that nature, and I want to refresh you that similar allegations were made to Chief Justice Emeritus one time by the DPP, and they were told the case stands or falls on the evidence brought before the judiciary. And truth be said, instead of demonizing the police officers, it is the investigating officers in these other so-called agencies that compromise the cases so that by the time it gets to court, there is actually no evidence. And people who otherwise would have been taken in go home free. And that is why state officers are the billionaires and zillionaires we have in villages. So, as much as you have your reservation about the Law Society of Kenya, because that is a society that provides judges and magistrates and advocates. And in law school, we were taught everything stands or falls on evidence. What are you going to do to ensure that officers that are deputed to investigate cases bring impeccable evidence that will ensure that there is a conviction? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Steve. But just before Steve, lest you're accused of profiling also, can we substitute churches with religious institutions? Because you use
thank you.
Because
thank you. Yeah,
so
religious
institutions.
I'm guided, Chair.
So
it is through religious agencies.
Bishop,
yeah,
religious
thank you.
Institutions,
I'm
not churches
obliged.
alone. Thank you very much. Honorable Aden, I hope you're not tired, but this is more and more interesting, absolutely.
But let me ask the good Bishop one or two questions also. Bishop, in your answers to some of the questions asked by my colleagues, you talked about fighting corruption. One of the best ways of fighting corruption is from the top down. I'm assuming you are referencing countries like Rwanda when you are thinking about the top down. Now that we know that we are Kenyans, not Rwandese, and the top down is not there, why will you put yourself in a position knowing that, and I quote your words, that we are a corrupt nation? And I further quote that corruption cannot be fought, it cannot be enforced. I think you repeated that a few times. Knowing all these things then, Bishop Oginde, why do you want to soil your name to be the chairman of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission in a country that is clearly, as you say, corrupt and there's no cure? The questions had also been asked by my colleague. Are you auditioning to become the chairman of the Cultural Change Commission instead of the chairman of Ethics and the Anti-Corruption Commission? Second, Lord Bishop, is that since we are actually a corrupt nation, I don't disagree with you much on that anyway. The commission you will head is also a Kenyan commission. Who is going to police the policemen? Do you, in that commission, have an internal affairs department, a department which will stop overzealous agents in the commission from weaponizing, if I use the question asked by our able deputy vice chair, our vice chair? Do we have an internal affairs department which will police the rogue commission officers? And finally, corruption one of the reasons why a lot of Kenyans partake in the business of corruption is to enrich themselves. Is it not better that instead of us looking for jail terms, that we use alternative dispute resolution and ask for restitution of what has been stolen, other than instead of just going through the criminal justice system? We hit them, we hit the corrupt people where it hurts by taking back all the wealth that they have accumulated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Haden. Bishop, that's quite a mouthful.
Yes.
I'm sure the people out there are not envying you. Now you have
in my belly that comes to fight this. He went on to ask about the clearance forms and interventions legislation, and let me just try and answer that. If, Chair, you looked at my profile, the reason that I sit here today is born out of a deep concern, a concern that I've expressed in different fora for many years. Somebody alluded to reading articles that I write in the Sunday Standard. I was just looking, reviewing, I've been writing since 2014, every Sunday. I counted the number of articles that I've written on the matter of corruption, and I was surprised. It's like, it's a topic that I write about almost every other day. This is not because it's a good thing to write about, but it's because it's something that burns in my belly. It is something that I believe is eating our nation. The former chair, Wabukala, in fact, before he became chair of the commission, one time appealed to the president to declare corruption a national disaster. And it indeed is. When I say Kenya is corrupt, I say Kenya is corrupt because I am part of Kenya and I know the levels of corruption that we have. We focus so much on big time corruption cases, but we have situations as small as in a primary school in the village somewhere, where a teacher decides to defraud, if I use the word, parents of their little money, people who cannot even afford. We have had the Ministry of Education coming out over and over again and saying you should not charge this, you should not have levies, you should not have this. And yet, we do know that there are, the big word in this country, cartels, who provide uniforms, provide books, and so on and so forth. So, really, unless and until we agree that we are sick, we are not going to help ourselves. So, this is something that actually burns in my heart. And the only reason I sit here is because somehow, whether rightly or wrongly, think that I could make a small contribution towards making a difference. I have not deluded myself that by the time I finish my 6 years, there'll be no corruption in this country, but that we will have moved this needle somewhere towards the positive side, no matter how little that movement is, because every movement is a movement. So I come with that as a passion. If you heard me preaching, honorable member, or sounding like I'm preaching, is because of that fire in my heart. Those who know me, whenever I talk about corruption, I get emotional. So I beg your permission, Mr. Chair, for sounding like a preacher, which I actually am. What interventions do we intend to make? At the risk of repeating myself, I think this may sound not the kind of things that Kenyans want. But culture change in any organization, if you go to an organization and you find that things are not working and people are coming late, everybody is coming late, the corridors are dirty, walls are broken, taps are leaking, what it tells you is that there's a culture of mediocrity that has permeated that organization. So that people don't see the rot that is there, because you get used to it. You go to the bathroom and you find the tap is leaking, but you got used to it. It doesn't bother you anymore. If you are going to make a difference as a new leader in that organization, the first thing you work on is culture change. To help people know that that leaking tap, that water that is running, is costing the organization money. To help people know that when we are in this dirty environment, it is affecting our health. So you have to help the organization to come to the realization.
Okay. As far as your approval is concerned.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I want to thank you all for asking me very tough questions. It has been, I would rather do an exam. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present myself here. If the committee is of the view that I have what it takes to lead this commission, my prayer would be that that is done objectively, not because I'm a bishop, but because as a Kenyan, I'm willing and ready to do this job. Otherwise, I would be very happy to allow another Kenyan to come in who can help get this country to the place where it should go. Otherwise, it is my hope that I have demonstrated that I have what it takes to help lead this fight against corruption. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. As regards your approval to take up this matter. Much ado now, I do ask Faith, please usher the bishop out. You may give back his documents. We have gone through them. If there are any issues, the secretary has done it. We've also done it from our desk. We may not. Thank you very much, the media. I do not think we have any other internal